Hi and welcome to another downsizing show. This is where we look at the latest trends and give you some really good information about the opportunities that exist if you are looking at downsizing. While empty nesters downsizing from the family home into smaller apartments is nothing new, the trend continues and in fact it's growing as this bubble of retirees comes through. The decision to downsize is multifaceted. In a study conducted by the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute recently, they identified a number of key drivers behind the decision to downsize. The most common factor contributing to downsizing for older Aussies was a desire for a change in lifestyle. The second most important factor contributing to it was an inability to maintain the family home and the garden. Children leaving home and retirement were also important factors, but relationship breakdown, health and disability were important only for a smaller percentage of people. Financial motivations were of importance to relatively few downsizers, and amongst these, financial gain was a more common motivation than financial difficulty. It can be a really difficult decision to make, so it's the goal of this show to give you as much information as possible. The shows are supported by downsizing.com.au, the site that provides a huge amount of unbiased information, advice and options for purchasing, renting or all types of aged care. As we've said in the past, downsizing does not mean having to move into smaller accommodation. It can in fact mean, as the research has indicated, a desire for an improvement in lifestyle. So in today's show, we're going to take a look firstly at what you need to know about retirement villages and other lifestyle villages. Back in just a moment. When buying a home in an over 50s village, it's important to know that you need to consider more than just the advertised price. To understand what the key considerations are, I'm joined by Amanda and Catherine Graham from downsizing.com.au. Amanda and Catherine, welcome to the show. When I was researching for today's show, I was amazed at just how many choices there are. Amanda, that must make it difficult for people.
Yes, there are a lot of different models around, and the really important thing is to get good legal and financial advice before you actually commit to buying something, because you just need to know exactly what it is that you are buying.
Yeah, we'll dig into that and the titles and the fees and all that kind of later in the show. Catherine, it sort of strikes me that because there are so many choices and there's so many individuals that need to be involved in these decisions, it can actually be quite frustrating. And I know that you and Amanda had that experience, didn't you?
Yes, that's right. Well, actually, that's how we set up the website initially. We were actually looking for accommodation for Amanda's father, and we actually jumped on the internet one night and we couldn't find anything that was available to search for. We thought, why aren't the big real estate sites, why don't they have listings for retirement villages or over 55 style accommodation? And that's how we actually started the business.
Yeah, it was a great start, wasn't it? Because it gave you that practical experience, understanding the frustration, and you must have to deal with that all the time as well in in the present sense?
Well, we've always developed the website and the business as a consumer-facing business, and we stand in the shoes of the consumer. So we're always thinking, every time we kind of look at new technology or look at new things that we could be implementing, we're always going, well, is this going to help those families out there? Is it going to help those consumers navigate this whole area? Yeah,
because that's the power of the site, I think, and you know, I've been on it quite a lot. And I can just, there's so much advice, really good advice. I want to, today in the show, we've got a few more segments to go. I want to deal a bit with emotion, but before we do, we've got to get into some technical stuff, Amanda. Titles. Tell me about the fees that are applied.
Well, it's not a case of one size fits all. There are many different types. It can be quite different to normal residential, freehold or strata title that people would be used to buying when they're buying an apartment or they're buying a normal residential house. So sometimes those titles do apply, but quite often there are different styles of title, which might be some sort of leasehold model, or it might involve buying what is technically a relocatable house and then leasing the site. People can be, even though people are buying a retirement apartment or villa, they may be entitled to government rent assistance if they are actually on the age pension.
Does that legislation vary much in the different states around the country?
It does. There's been a bit of a move to try and make it more uniform, but what it means is that again, it's quite a complicated area, and really from state to state it does vary quite a bit, which really does reinforce how important it is to get legal advice.
Yeah, and that would also, I'd imagine, make it a bit frustrating for family members, Amanda, you know, that, you know, sorry, Catherine, Amanda touched on the point that you know, they do vary from a normal residential transaction, so therefore the family may think they're dealing with a normal transaction when they're not.
That's right, and it's a very emotional decision, especially for the person that you might be searching for accommodation for.
Yeah.
So it's best that you actually have all of that research nutted out before you actually start, you know, the road trip or wherever you've got to go to actually search for the accommodation. So that's why when we started the website, we wanted the search to be as kind as possible, but when people come to our site, they actually don't know what they're looking for. And so that's why we have the different varying layers of accommodation that you can buy, as well as photographs, some information about the property, so that you can actually be equipped when you do take the person to go along.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And you would have no doubt studied this, but the different stages people go through.
And that's exactly how we've set up the site, because a lot of people who are used to all the technical jargon will say, oh, they just need to look for this or that. But as a consumer, you don't know what's out there, and you actually don't know what you need, and you don't know what sort of government subsidies might be available. So really what you want to do is arm them to find as much as they can in that early research phase, and then allow them to narrow it down by various criteria, and then they can start gathering information and then whittling down that short list.
Because I guess the reason they come to your site is not so much to get answers, but they've got a problem and they don't quite understand how to tackle it.
Yes, right. Yes. And just to be clear, I mean, you know, exactly the problem we faced with family members. You know, you don't actually know when you're a consumer that's never faced this sort of thing before, you're actually thinking, does this elderly relative need aged care? Do they need in-home care? Will they be fine in an independent living unit with a bit of extra assistance? Or are they actually fine with independent, you know, living anyway? So there's such an array of different options, and it's really quite a lengthy process to go through and contact different types of services and work out whether your family member is suited to this path or that path or something else.
Yeah, so important. Amanda, staying with you just for a moment, just talk about sales contracts just quickly. Do they vary much?
They do. There's been a move to bring in standard form contracts across various states, and it's certainly happening. However, you've got this legacy situation where you've got thousands of people living in villages on older contracts. You've even got various different contracts within a single village because of the legacy, because some people bought in at the beginning, sometimes different villages are bought by a different operator and then they institute different contracts. Yeah. So it's very, very complicated, which is again why I keep coming back to people really need to get legal advice.
Yeah, that is the best.
So they know exactly what they're buying. The other thing I would say too is that, look, there is a fair bit of flexibility with some of these type of models as well, and some of our providers are actually reluctant to put a price up front, and it's not because it's a huge price, it's because there is a lot of flexibility in terms of how they can work out that financing. Some people prefer to put a larger amount down up front with lower ongoing fees and perhaps no or lower exit fees, whereas other people might think, well, I can't afford to put that much in. However, if I put a lower amount in here, when the place is sold down the track, you know, I'm happy to trade that off against a higher exit fee. And there are a lot of operators who will be quite flexible.
And Kevin, it's also too about, you're actually not just buying a property, but you're actually buying the lifestyle. And I think that's where a lot of the consumers sort of weigh things up and go, well, it looks like it's got a pretty attractive offering in regards to certain things I don't have in my own house. So.
It's interesting that you raise that point, Catherine, because I think that's what the research has shown us, is that it's all about the lifestyle. It's got very little to do with the finances and so on, but it's all about the lifestyle. A great point, Catherine. Catherine, Amanda, stay with us. I want to come back after a short break, and we're going to look at some of the key questions that people need answered. So I know your research has covered off on that, and we'll come back and do that. So stay with us, there's a lot more to come. We're going to take a short break now, but I want you to have a look at this, because this is an ideal opportunity for you to look. If you're looking at downsizing, this might be just the solution for you. Back in a moment.
Hi there. Looking for a new lifestyle? We'd like to welcome you inside our community to see why we call Halcyon home. We're spoilt for choice, with a range of facilities right on our doorstep, including fitness and sports, art rooms, relaxation, leisure, and so much more. We're living the dream. And our homes, we think they're Australia's best. Open the door to a new way of living. Find what you're missing out on. Simply Google Life Begins at Halcyon.
Welcome back to the show. You know, buying a retirement or lifestyle village unit can be more complicated than buying any other type of residential property. But it's something that most of us have to consider at some stage in our lives. I'm joined by Amanda and Catherine Graham from downsizing.com.au. Ladies, I said before the break that we'd come back and have a talk about some key questions, but I want to ask firstly about the questions about legal title, and we'll stay with you on this, Amanda. What types of legal titles are there?
Well, there are actually a very large number, too many to sort of list here. But they do vary enormously, and sometimes people are buying a leasehold interest in a place, sometimes they're buying a relocatable home which is on then a leased site, sometimes they are buying into a strata title village. So there are many, many different types. There are also many different ways of cutting the financials involved in going into different villages. So as we keep saying, it is very important to get both legal advice and financial advice on before committing to move into a village or a retirement property.
Just before getting legal advice, can I ask you about stamp duty? Does that apply to these transactions?
It actually depends what sort of title it is, but there is actually a benefit in that many of the types of over 50s villages that are available, stamp duty doesn't apply. So again, that's a highly technical question that really needs specialist financial advice to be. There's no black and white answer because there are so many different options out there.
So complex, isn't it?
It is very complex.
It is very complex. Yeah. Let's talk about entry fees, because this is something that people ask me about sometimes, it's the experience we went through.
Yes.
Do they vary, and where do they apply?
Well, they do vary a lot, and I mean a lot of the research that's done, particularly by the Property Council, suggests that the entry level into the traditional retirement village model is generally about 60% of the freehold, comparable properties nearby. So you are getting a discount when you go into one of these places. So you're getting lifestyle or location at a price point, an entry level price point, which is below. But obviously there may be ongoing fees, there may be shares of capital gain, there may be some type of exit fee, but it does vary enormously from village to village.
Just quickly, I'll come to you in a moment, Catherine. I want to talk about the stress of doing that, but Amanda, staying with you just for a moment, legal costs. Does the person going into the home need to pay any of the costs on behalf of
I can't answer that
No,
question, Kevin,
okay.
because I think it varies enormously from state to state
Does
and
it?
depending what
Yeah.
sort of model it is. But basically, the important thing to note is that when people are looking at a particular village, once they go in there and they start talking seriously and they like it, they are obliged to give them a statement, basically an information document,
Oh,
a
disclosure,
disclosure
yeah.
document which outlines all of the relevant charges and fees for that particular village. And as I think I've probably mentioned earlier, quite a lot of the operators will be flexible in terms of how they structure that. So if they have a buyer that can't quite afford the normal entry rate, there might be some sort of deal to be done in terms of adjusting the ways that the village recoups other fees in order to be able to allow that person to come into the village. So it can be a very affordable and a very attractive option for people.
So I imagine, Catherine, that all of this information is available on the site, isn't it, for people to go?
It's available. It's depending on the client as to how their process is.
Oh, I see.
think you have to go down. You have to first off apply for the
Yes.
property on our site, and then obviously an information pack, or they may invite you to the village to come along and have a look at the units. So yeah, it just depends on different clients as to how their process works. But yes, we do actually have a fantastic news and info page, which has a lot of interesting articles on varying subjects to do with moving and retiring, moving into a retirement village, as well as we've got fantastic links on the site to a lot of government information sites, things that can help you along the journey.
It must have been hard putting all this together, Catherine, all the background information.
Yes, well, I guess we've been learning as we've been going and growing the business. It's been that we've, as Amanda's actually pointed out earlier, we've always approached the site from a consumer facing. We want it to be a consumer site, so that we want that information to be available to everybody that comes onto the site as much as we can provide.
I suppose feedback from consumers is important for you too, isn't it, as well? How are they using the site? Where are the deficiencies?
Obviously, we're always looking at that.
Yes. I was going to ask you how you're tapping
However,
into
we
that.
have to be careful about consumer-facing feedback, because if we've got 177,000 consumers every month using our site, they will very quickly send us emails saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a one-bedroom unit in Port Macquarie. Can you help me find it?" And they actually want us
Yes.
to do the searching for them, and we've set up the whole thing so that it's a one-stop shop online, available 24/7, that allows people to do that early research. And we don't pretend to be an expert advisor, but we do point people in the right direction and raise issues that they should be thinking about.
I think also too the way that we've designed the site too, we want it to be user friendly. So it was like Amanda and I when we first jumped onto the internet 15 years ago. What did we expect to find?
Yes.
And this is the site that we hope that people will come to and
Those
visit.
figures you mentioned there about visitors to the site, it shows how impressive it is as a site and how valuable it is. We're going to take another short break. When we come back, I want to pick up on a subject that we talked about before we started today's show, and that was about renting. And I know that that's one part of the site that's getting a lot of traction. So I want to talk about that and why more people are looking at that as an option and what the opportunities are. So stay with us, a lot more to come. We'll be back after this short break, and another excellent opportunity for you to check out a property that you might want to consider if you're looking at downsizing. Back in just a moment. The number of older Australians who are private tenants will more than double over the next 15 years. So what's being done to accommodate for this increase and what protections are needed and are available? I'm joined by Amanda and Catherine Graham from downsizing.com.au to help us answer some of those questions. Ladies, it's one thing to say that they're going to double, but just how big are those figures?
Well, yes, we've noticed a massive increase in the number of consumers that are looking for rental retirement accommodation, and there are specialist rental retirement villages. However, their financial model doesn't stack up in the major capital cities where the cost of land is very expensive. So there are some very good rental villages which are around, but they tend to be in regional areas or areas where the land isn't quite so expensive, and they generally are very, very popular with people because it means that people can have security of tenure, they can be in a like-minded community, they can have, socialise with people around them, they can usually, if they're on a pension, it's affordable and they can claim government rent assistance. So all of that is great. However, what we found was that we noticed a very increasing number of people desperately searching for rentals, and I think when you look at the large numbers of people that are coming through who are ageing into this age group, who are then on a pension, there are many people who, for many different reasons, find themselves without a house or without owning property at that stage in your life, and that might be fine while you're still working and you can afford to pay market rent, but when you actually finish your working life and you might be made redundant earlier, or you might end up losing your property through a divorce or bankruptcy or a death, whatever. There are lots of reasons why marriages break up, why assets are split, why people end up at the end of their life unable to afford a market rent and not owning a property. So we actually were faced with a significantly growing problem on the site. So what we did was we actually set up the Senior Flatmates ads, which are free ads for consumers to meet other potential flatmates. Now it might be that you're an empty nester, you have vacant bedrooms in your house, and they're certainly using the site to think about their next step. But meanwhile, if they've just lost their job or for some other reason they need to keep the finances going, or they've still got a large mortgage, they may want to rent out some of those rooms. So we thought, well, it's great for that to help people source rooms, but equally there might be two people on a pension who can't afford market rent in a particular area, but they might be able to team up and rent a two-bedroom apartment together and that way afford the rent. So we get all of those things on Senior Flatmates, but it's really just trying to plug that gap because there is a huge and growing gap in senior accommodation.
Catherine, it's wonderful, isn't it, that people can have that option? Because a lot of us think, well, when we retire, we have to buy into a retirement village, but to know that there's the option of renting takes a lot of pressure off.
Well, it's coming back to like the sharing economy as well. So it's sort of like this generation that are applying for these ads or putting the ads up were originally from the shared accommodation sort of generation, when they were young students renting. So often that what we find too is it mightn't be a senior person renting with a senior person. It might be a student who comes in who might be able to do some chores for some reduced rent. So it's getting back to that model of shared accommodation, like shared sort of economy, which I really like.
It is changing.
Each other, each other out.
And congratulations too on realising that was the way the market was going. And I guess that, once again, something that we touched on earlier is that how in touch you are with that end of the market. So
we've always been ahead of our time.
Yes, you have. In fact, because
up,
you guys have been doing this for about 15 years, which is quite amazing. So you are well ahead of the curve. And in fact, I think off air we were talking about what it was like when you first started and how people thought, well, no one in the world will retirees be looking at the internet. Quite the opposite.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we find, Catherine, don't we, that I know with us communicating with our grandkids, we're doing it on.
Well, I think that when
iPads.
we first started the site, there was this sort of perception that older people, why would they go on the internet? But it was actually people like Amanda and myself searching for people. So there definitely was, the audience was definitely there, and there was certainly a need. So as I said, that's how we came about the idea for our business.
It was one of those things that was under the radar. It tends to be the oldest daughters and daughters-in-law, which is, you know, typical of us.
Yes.
And every family you spoke to was going through that same process of pulling out their hair, saying, how do I find a place for grandma? So it was really designed in the early days for people like us who were busy with our own families and also looking after older family members and trying to navigate that really complex.
Are you telling me that men are no good at this sort of thing? That it's a
Well,
female
not saying
domain?
that they're no good. It's just one of those quiet things that is just taken care of generally by the women in the family.
Well, I think women, you know, generalisation coming here, so brace yourself, Rob, but, you know, women are generally better nurturers, and, you know, it fits, I think. So,
I guess it's just part of the role, isn't it?
It is.
I think it's also too, with Amanda and I being so time poor at the time as well, with young families. I mean, we don't actually have time to, you know, find out what sort of publication we should be looking at. You know, it was just easier at night just to jump on the internet and try and find something.
Yeah. Hey, Catherine and Amanda, it's been fabulous talking to you. Thank you for spending so much time with us in the show. There's so much information that we've got to cover. We'll come back in a future show and answer a few more questions, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
And thank you for joining us. Of course, our show comes to you with the compliments of downsizing.com.au, which is a great site. Go to it, check it out. I mean, we've just only skimmed the surface here today in the show with the information that's available on the site, and of course lots of opportunities for you if you are looking at downsizing to have a look at what opportunities exist. I'm Kevin Turner, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time right here. Well, that's it for another show. Thanks very much to you for joining us, and also especially to Amanda and Catherine Graham from downsizing.com.au. That is the site to go to if you want any more information about downsizing. I'm Kevin Turner. I'll see you next time.